Jamie, why don't you get us started?
I think social factors are more to blame for Jamestown because whenever like an environmental factor does happen, it turns into like a big argument, and then like when the disease and illness was going around, everyone was fighting about like what was causing it instead of like actually trying to figure out how to fix it.
All right, so your argument, just to kind of summarize, Damien, is that social factors are a bigger deal because in your mind, even the environmental factors are kind of leading to more social problems? Is that a decent summary of it? Okay. All right, somebody else want to agree with Damien or maybe disagree with Damien or share their own? Yeah,
I
Austin, go ahead.
kind of disagree and agree in a way. I agree that it is social factors, but my social factors is the fighting, which led to the fighting that you talked about, but also the fighting between both the Powhatans could really end the colony.
Okay. Somebody else? And again, from now on, I won't even call on you guys. You can just kind of interject. So like you can just kind of continue.
Environmental factors, because like they cause all the social factors. Because like they're only angry from all the environmental factors. Because whenever one happens, like Damien said, they always start arguing about it. And like that's why they have the social factors going on. The environmental factors.
Okay.
I don't always believe that because of the Powhatans, it wasn't like environmental.
Why do you think the Powhatans hate everyone? Because they don't have enough resources, and that's an environmental
So Alexis, couple quick reminders. So again, we're not debating. We want to let each other finish too. So if Austin is sharing or if anyone's sharing, let them finish their idea. And if you want to respond, you can. But you gotta wait for people to finish. All right. So
I agree with that, Alexis, but I disagree again because of Powhatans. They're currently in like war and like the brink of war, but like also like trying to trade.
Okay, let me explain words. The only reason that they're in war is because they don't have enough resources in their current area, because all the other people like stole it. All the settlers stole their territory, and now they're trying to get rid of them because they needed it. Because environmental factors means they don't have enough.
okay. I'm hearing two fair arguments. Somebody else who hasn't contributed yet want to contribute their thoughts to that first question? Joseph, go ahead.
Wait, which question are we on?
The first question, are social factors or environmental factors more to blame for the problems besieging Jamestown?
Oh, I thought we were on the second one, but
Not quite yet.
I have a comment.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm gonna say it in the form of a story. It was a peaceful time for the Powhatans. They had a lot of resources, but now when the settlers came, they didn't. The settlers just took a lot of stuff from them. So now the Powhatans are like, hey, that's ours. We need it back.
Okay.
No,
the settlers
Joseph,
are
they
like,
traded for stuff. They didn't
Yes.
take it, or then they definitely would have gotten it. But
Well, I think that there is some validity to both of those claims. So Joseph, maybe explain
because
the Powhatans, what, like, maybe what is their frustration?
You're like trying to get stuff from the settlers, but the settlers are greedy, and they're like, yeah, here's a little bit. I don't want to give you a lot because we have 12 people.
Okay. And is what you're describing a social factor or an environmental factor? I just want to make sure we.
It's not exactly what I said, but I figured I'd make it something else because mine sounds really weird.
Well, I think you are describing one of those. You are describing. Which one do you think more what you're talking about? Like an argument between.
It sounds like
Is it more social or more environmental?
social.
I think you're right. Yeah, I think that you're describing a social issue.
Yeah.
Montana, you kind of interjected there. Do you want to add anything more to what you said there, or like maybe explain what you think for that first question?
I think the social factors is more of the problem because if they stop getting in so many arguments, maybe they could like get what they want and then be built if they stop getting in.
All right.
And also, the only reason the Powhatans were trying to attack them was not because they took their food, because they had taken their land.
Okay. anybody else wanna share their thoughts on that first question? Again, you can either agree with somebody, or if you have a new idea that hasn't been shared yet, more than welcome to share. I wanna see if we can get at least a few more people to share on that first question.
The Manhattans are kind of like untrustworthy because sometimes we're going to show them, but they also like attack you sometimes. It's like, they don't know like what,
Believe them.
they don't know what to like trust and when to.
Okay, so Manhattan's being unreliable, and again, would you say that that is a social thing or an environmental thing? A social, okay.
No.
Just out of curiosity, because I haven't heard anyone say it yet, is anyone making the argument that environmental factors are a bigger threat than social factors?
I did.
Alexis did.
Oh,
I literally explained it.
well, maybe just explain one more time what your perspective is, Alexis.
So the environmental factors, because like, whenever an environmental factor happens, it always leads into social factors. And so saying that social factors is like saying that the root of the problem isn't more dangerous than how like the actual.
Okay,
Because environmental factors is the start of the problem. It's still a problem, but it's definitely worse than the social factors, because the social factors all stem from environmental factors.
okay, so
And
you're,
also the whole reason that they're going to Jamestown is for an environmental factor, because the British needed gold.
got it, okay, so your argument is that one is causing the other, the environmental factors are making the social factors worse. Okay, just wanted to clarify that. Okay, anyone else want to share on that first question before we kind of move on to the second question? Anyone else have an idea that they want to get out there?
I agree with Alexis.
Okay, in what way do you agree with Alexis?
The way that the environmental factors are the roots, and it like stems off into social factors. I think it's interesting.
Got it, okay, alright. Joseph, yes?
I also agree with Alexis.
Okay, alright, in the same way that Yoretzi agrees with Alexis?
Basically.
Basically, okay. Alright, well, let's move on to that second question. I think people had some interesting thoughts on this one. The question is, are the settlers themselves or the Powhatans more of a threat to Jamestown's development? So basically, who's a bigger threat to Jamestown? Is it the settlers themselves or is it the Powhatans? So somebody get us started off with that. Share us your claim or your perspective
The
on that.
settlers, because like, because they're choosing not to work together, and if they actually work together, then they could take on the Powhatans. But they're not, because like they're all mad at each other, they're trying to kill each other. A lot of people there have gotten close to death because they themselves have been like trying to kill each other.
I think the settlers because is that the Powhatans that would have roots.
Okay.
I agree with Claire.
I say the settlers because mainly the only way that the Powhatans are like affecting them is like whenever they run short of supplies, like something bad happens to the settlers, they somewhat think that it's the Powhatans because they did something to them. Like when they ran out of food, they thought that the Powhatans could have raided them. And then, that's really the only way that they think the Powhatans could be a threat to them.
Joseph,
I think it's the Powhatans because, mostly because the Powhatans keep attacking, and that's causing the decreasing of the development of Jamestown.
okay,
Because
okay,
they're not building, they keep getting attacked.
alright.
I say the settlers because they keep on screwing each other up because they keep on like with Captain Smith, he almost got hung for being accused of something he didn't do. There's also the guy who had the secret extra food stash, and overall just also them fighting. The Powhatans, like, they attack occasionally, but it's not as dangerous as them screwing each other over when they're on the same side as well.
Got it. Couple things I liked that you did there, Yoretzi, is that you brought up two specific instances from the book to support your argument, so that was good, I like that.
Because like the settlers are always like they're more they're more susceptible to infighting with each other because they're the only people there that they know, and like they don't really trust the Powhatans even, so they're more prepared for attacking them than they are from like the inside. Like,
Interesting. So you're kind of saying they know what to expect with the Powhatans, they know that they can be a danger, but they're not really sure how to best deal with all the problems with each other.
yeah.
That's an interesting argument.
Because also they're not used to that in like the British people either, where they came from, because like everybody was a group. It would be very weird to have infighting there.
Interesting.
I
Okay.
I agree with Alexis because, like she said, they're mainly more defended to an outside attack than they are from an inside attack.
Interesting, okay. By the way, something I want to mention, guys, that I forgot to mention at the beginning. As we're having the discussion, and maybe you could do this in the margins of your paper or on the back, I want you trying, this is kind of a new thing, because we haven't really done this up to this point, trying to take an occasional note. It could be something really short, where you just write down like a word, or maybe a couple of words that somebody said. Just so you can kind of keep track of what ideas people are sharing throughout the discussion. Because what we want to be able to do with this discussion too is think back to it and kind of remember what are some of the different things that people are saying. Because sometimes it's hard to remember that all, like about the discussion, it's hard to remember what an individual said. But if somebody says something interesting or has an interesting idea, I want us to practice taking a note of it. Because as we continue to do these like in the next year and in the 8th grade, that note-taking aspect of the discussion is going to be an important feature. So for the remainder of our discussion, because we still have one more question to talk about, I want you to see if you can add a couple of notes on things that kind of catch your attention or things that somebody said that you think are important. Does anybody have any additional thoughts on that second question there before we move on to the third one? Anyone have any thoughts about the Powhatans or Jamestown or the settlers being more of a threat? If I have to summarize what people have said so far, people generally think that the settlers seem to be a bigger threat to themselves. However, there are some definite problems with the Powhatans that are making it difficult, but maybe the general consensus is that the settlers may be a bigger threat. Does anyone want to add any final thoughts on that question before we move on?
The Powhatans kind of like attack, and then the settlers like kind of freak out over it, and like things are kind of happening behind.
Okay, so the Powhatans attacked and then the settlers kind of panicked and started freaking out and maybe doing some things that were counterproductive. Maybe. Does it?
Basically, summary is that they basically just got anxiety from the attack.
They got anxiety from the attack. Okay.
Yes, they're like, what are we gonna do if they attack again?
Yeah.
We need to be ready. We need reinforcement.
It's true. They
Instead
can afford
of
that.
dealing with their food problem and their water problem and their illness problem, they're like, yeah, we don't. That's a problem for later. We need to get reinforcements.
That's an interesting idea. So you're basically saying that the issue with the Powhatans is making them not be able to deal with their other issues as effectively because they're too distracted by that issue. That's an interesting argument.
Yeah, the settlers are distracted by the Powhatans. They don't want to get attacked again.
I like that. That's
So
interesting.
they're like kind of just not dealing with something that could make them lose pretty much their whole little society there.
Got it. All right, last chance to share an idea about that second question. Anybody?
Speak now or forever hold your peace.
Okay, let's move on to that final question then. Last question is the Jamestown settlement thriving or declining more at this point in the novel? And when I say at this point, I mean like chapter 16. So, are they on the up? Are they improving? Are they doing well? Or are they going the other direction? Are they starting to have more problems? And then that why component. Like, why do you think that? Why do you think they're either thriving or declining? So, Austin, maybe get us started on that one.
I think they're declining and thriving in a certain way. I think they're starting to like get how to like survive, but I also see how there's more and more conflict between each other in the book. So I see how that could easily end them if the Powhatans attack right now in the book.
Okay, so you see some evidence of thriving and also some evidence of declining.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's pretty much straight in the middle.
They
Go
also,
Joseph and then-
so they also basically, so like they're basically declining because of the loss of food and water, how they're keep fighting. I already talked about this, like the whole anxiety thing with them. They're like, we gotta protect our land, and they're like not worrying, and they're like just don't even care about the whole food and illness problem and water.
Okay, so your argument is that they are declining. Yes, okay.
I think they're doing both because, like when they fought, for example, when the settlers, when the gentlemen were hoarding all the food, they fought with the commoners, and then once the commoners, arrested the gentlemen, they had all that food that they could share amongst each other.
Okay,
Okay.
alright. Let's get some more thoughts on that question. I know you guys all have an answer, because I've seen you guys, you have things there. Again, even if you're kind of repeating what somebody else said, that's okay. Let's hear some more voices.
It's declining because they like never thrived in the first place, and then they keep trying to kill the guy who can get them to thrive.
And who is that guy?
Captain John Smith.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're constantly shooting themselves in the foot, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
You guys know that idiom, shooting yourself in the foot?
I've never heard that.
I've heard of it, I don't remember the meaning.
So if you shoot yourself in the foot, that means you're doing something to yourself that's like, you're hurting
Making it
yourself
worse.
essentially. You're making a situation worse.
You're making your pain worse.
Yes,
You're preventing yourself from being able to do something good.
yes, potentially. So, let's keep going on that though. Thriving or declining. Also, one thing I want to mention is when we ask questions like this, I know it's tempting to say, well, I think they're thriving and declining. Or on a previous question, well, I think environmental factors and social factors are both to blame. It's tempting to do that. One skill though that we're practicing here is making a claim. And when you make a claim, you do have to kind of try to take a side. Meaning, even though you might see evidence that points towards both being true, I want to push you guys to like pick a side and use the evidence to really argue for that side. So instead of riding the fence, which is where you kind of flip-flop between your arguments, you kind of pick one and argue for that one. But anyways, let's keep talking about that third question. I know some people haven't shared yet that probably have some ideas, so let's keep sharing.
I think they decline more since the natives because the gentleman like took a bunch of food and like so a bunch of commoners were just
All right, so you're bringing up again the food issue of the gentleman hoarding the food. Okay, for sure.
like being greedy.
The greed, yes, the hoarding of the food.
I agree with Alexis and Amelia.
About, remind me again, what do you agree with again?
I agree that Alexis has been basically shooting himself in the foot, and I agree with Amelia because she just said about the basically like inside.
Okay, alright. Is anybody making the argument that the Jamestown settlement is thriving? Or does anyone have any evidence that the Jamestown settlement is thriving or doing well?
When Captain Smith came back with the different Powhatan tribe or clan, they were more open to trading with the settlers, and so that they could get more food and supplies.
Okay, so that would be a piece of evidence that might point to them thriving, at least in one way. Would you guys agree with that? What I like, I just want to point this out, is when you guys point to a specific piece of evidence in the book that supports your argument. That's the best type of argument, is when you can say, I think they're declining, here's a specific thing that happens in the book that shows this. Or I think they're thriving, here's a specific moment that happens that shows this. That's when you're making a really good argument. Any other thoughts on that third question there? Anybody who hasn't shared yet want to share their thoughts on that question?
What?
Does Does anybody have any final thoughts that they have not shared about any of the questions that they want to make sure they get out there before we close out our discussion? Going once, going twice.
Hold twice.
Okay. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to take a look at your speaking and listening checklist. And I want you to, in the self column, the column that says self, I want you to mark whether or not you feel like you accomplished or did not quite accomplish your goal. So if you feel like you accomplished your goal,
I did.
you're going to put a plus, a little plus symbol